6 officers had their hands near their weapons, but Danielle Carter was the only one watching the danger rolling toward them. Rain whispered across the 4th level of St. Matthew's parking garage, turning the concrete silver beneath the fluorescent lights. Danielle stood beside a black SUV with her father's keys resting in her palm while 6 uniformed officers formed a loose circle around her. Sergeant Cole Mercer occupied the center, broad-shouldered and certain, wearing the expression of a man who believed doubt belonged to everyone else. Officer Ryan Blake took the keys from Danielle's hand and tossed them onto the hood. "Let's see how far your story gets you now," he said. 2 officers laughed. Danielle did not. Her gray hoodie was damp at the shoulders, her running shoes were worn, and nothing about her suggested wealth or influence. That appeared to be all the evidence Mercer needed. Yet while they studied her clothes, Danielle studied everything else: the security camera above the elevator, the narrow exit lane behind Mercer, the distance between each officer, and the dark delivery truck trembling near the top of the ramp. Something about that truck was wrong. Stay with this story, and subscribe, because what these officers failed to notice would change every assumption they had made about the woman standing before them. "Place your hands on the vehicle," Mercer ordered. Danielle's voice remained even. "Run the plate first." "We're asking the questions," Blake replied. "Then ask the right one." The laughter stopped. For half a second, Mercer's face tightened. He had been responding to a vague report about a suspicious woman near an expensive vehicle. No broken window. No alarm. No witness claiming ownership. Just suspicion shaped into certainty before he had even arrived. Danielle slowly placed one hand on the hood, but her eyes remained on the truck. Its front end dipped slightly. A faint metallic click traveled through the garage, almost lost beneath the rain and the distant hum of traffic. Danielle recognized it immediately. Weight shifting. A brake under strain. "Sergeant," she said, "you need to clear the ramp." Blake smirked. Now she's giving traffic lessons. Officer Nathan Cole, the youngest of the group, glanced uphill. "Sir, maybe we should check the vehicle registration." Mercer ignored him. His attention stayed fixed on Danielle, as though obedience mattered more than truth. "Both hands where I can see them." Danielle lifted her second hand slowly. She could feel the cold hood beneath her palm and hear the truck's engine idling unevenly 40 yards away. The vehicle moved less than an inch. Then another. No one else noticed. Mercer stepped closer. "You people always think confidence makes a story believable." Danielle turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. There was no anger in her expression, only control. "And men like you mistake confidence for evidence." The garage fell quiet. Somewhere above them, metal groaned again. This time louder. Danielle's gaze snapped toward the ramp. The truck had begun to roll. The truck moved again, barely at first, then with enough force to send a dull vibration through the concrete. Danielle saw the front tires begin to turn toward the descending lane, and for one suspended second, the entire garage seemed to hold its breath. Officer Nathan Cole followed her gaze and finally understood. "Sergeant," he said, his voice tightening, "the truck is rolling." Mercer looked over his shoulder, but not quickly enough to understand what Danielle had already measured: the angle of the ramp, the weight of the vehicle, the wet surface, and the narrow lane leading straight toward the lower level. Her mind reached backward before her body moved, not to the garage, but to a quiet hospital room 3 floors below. 8 hours earlier, Danielle had arrived in Baltimore on a red-eye flight from San Diego with one small duffel bag and no plan beyond seeing her father. Walter Carter had served 26 years in the Navy and had spent the last week recovering from heart surgery. He had sounded stronger on the telephone than he looked in person. His skin had been pale beneath the morning light, and a thin line of exhaustion had settled around his eyes. "You came all this way just to watch me sleep?" he had asked. Danielle had smiled and placed his old silver watch on the bedside table. "You taught me to show up." Walter had tried to laugh, but the effort became a cough. Even then, he had studied her the way only a father could, noticing the stiffness in her left shoulder and the way she checked every doorway without appearing to. "Still carrying the whole world?" he had asked. Danielle had looked toward the window. "Not today." She had meant it. For years, people had known her as an instructor, a strategist, the woman called when calm had to survive chaos. Then one training mission had ended with a teammate never coming home, and Danielle had stepped away from the life that had taught her to see danger before it announced itself. She had returned to civilian work, kept her history private, and learned how to enter rooms without becoming the center of them. Walter never pushed her to explain. Before falling asleep that morning, he had handed her the keys to his black SUV and asked her to retrieve a wool coat from the cargo area. "The blue one," he had murmured. "Your mother always said I looked respectable in blue." Danielle had left the hospital wearing the same gray hoodie she had worn on the flight. She had no uniform, no badge, and no reason to believe anyone would question her. Now 6 officers stood between her and the moving truck. Mercer raised one hand as if the vehicle might obey authority. Blake stepped backward. Travis Reed lowered his telephone. Danielle heard a child's voice from somewhere inside the truck, small and frightened. The vehicle gained speed. She pulled her hands from the hood. "There is someone inside," she said. Mercer reached toward her arm. Danielle turned, not with panic, but precision. "Do not stop me." Mercer's hand stopped inches from Danielle's arm. The truck rolled faster, its tires whispering against the wet concrete as it crossed the upper lane and tilted toward the ramp. A child's face appeared behind the passenger window, pale and wide-eyed, both hands pressed against the glass. "There is a boy in there," Nathan said. The certainty in his voice finally broke the circle. Blake turned toward the truck. Reed lowered his telephone completely. Officer Jason Miller moved 2 steps forward, but Mercer raised his palm. "Nobody runs into traffic without a plan." Danielle looked at him. "Then make one." He did not answer. The hesitation lasted only a second, but Danielle knew how much could happen inside a second. Cole Mercer had spent 20 years wearing authority until it had become part of his posture. He trusted instinct, command, and the reputation he had built across the district. That morning, dispatch had reported a suspicious woman near a luxury vehicle, and he had decided what he would find before his patrol car entered the garage. Danielle's gray hoodie had confirmed the story he had already written. Her calm had irritated him. Her questions had sounded like defiance. Now the same certainty held him still while the truck gathered speed. "Block the lower exit," Nathan said. "We can redirect it." "There is no time," Danielle replied. She could see the route clearly. The truck would descend nearly 60 feet, cross the next level, and strike the barrier near the pedestrian walkway. A family was stepping out of the elevator below, unaware of the danger moving toward them. Danielle pointed. "Clear that landing and call hospital security. Tell them to shut the lower lane." Jason reached for his radio without waiting for permission. Mercer looked at him sharply. "Did I give that order?" Jason met his eyes. "No, Sergeant." Then he pressed the radio button anyway. Something shifted in the group. It was small, almost invisible, but Danielle felt it. Authority had begun to separate from judgment. Nathan ran toward the stairwell. Eric Walsh moved to warn the family below. Reed remained frozen near the SUV, his telephone hanging uselessly at his side. Blake stepped into Danielle's path. "You stay here. Move. You are still being detained." The truck's horn sounded once, long and uneven, as the boy inside struck the center of the steering wheel. Danielle's breathing slowed. Her shoulders loosened. She did not see 6 uniforms anymore. She saw distances, angles, choices. Blake reached for her wrist. Danielle shifted half a step, and his hand closed on empty air. Jason noticed the movement. It was controlled, efficient, almost too clean to understand. "She could have put you on the ground," he said quietly. Blake stared at him. Danielle never looked away from the truck. "I am not here to fight you," she said. "I am trying to save that child." Mercer's jaw tightened. He glanced at the registration screen inside his patrol car. The result had already loaded. The SUV belonged to Walter Carter. Danielle had told the truth. Mercer saw it, and for one brief moment, shame flickered across his face. Then pride covered it. "Blake, hold her." Danielle heard the truck strike the edge of the ramp and begin its descent. Her voice dropped to a calm that frightened them more than anger could have. "You have already wasted enough time." Blake stepped forward and reached for Danielle again, this time with both hands, certain that size and authority would settle what judgment had failed to resolve. Danielle moved only enough to protect herself. She turned her wrist, shifted her weight, and guided his momentum past her without striking him or forcing him to the ground. Blake stumbled 2 steps and caught himself against the hood of Walter Carter's SUV. The movement was so clean that the other officers did not immediately understand what had happened. Danielle remained exactly where she had been, hands open, breathing steady, her attention fixed on the truck descending the ramp. "Do not touch me again," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the garage seemed to carry it farther than a shout. Mercer's face hardened. "You just resisted an officer. I prevented an unnecessary injury." Jason Miller watched her feet, her shoulders, and the precise distance she kept from every person around her. He had attended defensive tactics courses for 12 years, but he had never seen someone neutralize a hold with so little force. "Sergeant," Jason said carefully, "she is trained." Blake turned toward him, embarrassed. "Trained in what?" Danielle answered without looking at either man. "Control." The truck crossed the first turn of the ramp. Its tires slid briefly on the wet surface, then caught again. The frightened boy inside was now visible through the windshield, trapped by a seat belt and reaching toward the steering wheel. Below, Nathan had cleared the elevator landing and was waving drivers away from the lower lane. Eric Walsh used his patrol car to block the entrance, but there was still no safe way to stop the moving vehicle. Danielle measured the remaining distance. 40 yards. Perhaps less. Mercer stepped in front of her. "You are not going anywhere." For the first time, Danielle looked directly at the registration screen glowing inside his patrol car. Walter Carter's name was clearly displayed. Beneath it was the hospital parking permit connected to the same license plate. Mercer followed her gaze, and the truth passed silently between them. "You knew," she said. He did not respond. Rain tapped against the open side of the garage. Somewhere below, Nathan shouted that the lane was clear. The truck's engine rose as gravity carried it faster. Danielle looked back at Mercer. She could have exposed him in front of everyone. She could have demanded his badge number, pointed to the camera, or forced him to admit what he had already seen. Instead, she made a different choice. "We can discuss what you did after that child is safe." Mercer's eyes narrowed. "You are not in command here." Danielle stepped around him. "Then start acting like someone who is." Blake moved to block her again, but Jason extended an arm across his chest. "Let her go." "Have you lost your mind?" Blake asked. Jason watched Danielle study the truck's path. "No. I think we are finally using it." Mercer turned sharply toward him, but the sound from the ramp ended the argument. The truck clipped a rubber divider, changing its angle toward a row of parked vehicles. Danielle removed her damp hoodie and wrapped it around her forearm. She handed her bag to Jason. "Keep the lower walkway empty." Jason took it without question. "What are you planning?" Danielle started toward the ramp, each step calm and deliberate. "I am planning to reach him before the truck reaches the barrier." Danielle reached the top of the ramp just as the truck began its final descent. The vehicle was moving faster now, its tires sliding across the wet concrete with a low, steady hiss. Inside, the boy struggled against the seat belt, his face tight with fear. Danielle raised one hand so he could see her. "Look at me," she called. "Keep your hands away from the wheel." The boy turned toward her. That small response was enough. Behind Danielle, Mercer shouted for everyone to stand back, but the order came too late and without direction. Blake moved toward the center lane, then stopped when the truck shifted toward him. Reed backed into a concrete pillar, still holding his telephone. Nathan continued clearing the lower level, guiding 2 hospital employees behind a steel support column. Jason followed Danielle at a distance, waiting for instructions he now trusted more than the ones coming through his radio. Danielle studied the speed, the slope, and the narrow space beside the passenger door. She had less than 15 seconds. "Jason," she called, "open the emergency gate at the next turn." He ran without asking why. Mercer stepped into Danielle's path. "You are not getting near that vehicle." Danielle did not slow. "Then help me." He hesitated. The truck's horn sounded again. The boy had begun to cry, but Danielle heard something else beneath it, the uneven rhythm of the engine and the scrape of a loose rear wheel. The truck could not be stopped by standing in front of it. It had to be redirected. "Move every vehicle from the outside row," she said. "Give it a clear angle toward the empty maintenance bay." Nathan repeated the order over the radio. Eric Walsh climbed into his patrol car and pulled it out of the lane. Blake finally moved, waving a driver backward. Even Reed lowered his telephone and began guiding people away. For the first time since the encounter began, all 6 officers were looking where Danielle had been looking from the start. The truck passed the first support column. Danielle ran beside it, matching its speed for several steps. The passenger window was open less than an inch. She used her wrapped forearm to pull the door handle, but the lock held. "What is your name?" she called through the glass. "Ethan," the boy answered. "Ethan, I need you to stay still and listen to my voice." His breathing slowed just enough for him to hear. Danielle pointed toward the parking brake near the center console. "Can you reach the black lever beside the seat?" Ethan stretched, but the belt held him short. "I cannot." The maintenance bay was 20 yards away. Jason opened the emergency gate, revealing a wide, empty lane bordered by thick rubber barriers. Danielle saw the only remaining option. She moved toward the front passenger side and gripped the mirror housing, using it to steady herself as she reached through the narrow window. Mercer stared at her. "You will fall." Danielle looked back once. "Then do not let the truck turn." Mercer understood. He ordered Blake and Walsh to use their patrol cars as moving guides along the outside lane, leaving space without touching the truck. Jason positioned himself near the open bay and signaled the angle. The plan formed around Danielle because she had given them something authority alone had not: clarity. She reached farther through the window until her fingers found the interior lock. The door opened. Wind and rain rushed into the cab. Danielle held the frame, climbed onto the side step, and looked at Ethan. "You are not alone," she said. Then the truck entered the final turn. With Danielle balanced on the side step, one hand gripping the door frame and the other reaching across the passenger seat. Ethan stared at her, frozen beneath the seat belt. "Keep your eyes on me," she said. "Do not look at the wall." The maintenance bay opened ahead, wide enough for the truck but narrow enough to punish the smallest mistake. Jason stood near the gate, signaling with both arms. Blake and Walsh kept their patrol cars moving along the outside lane, creating a corridor without closing in. Mercer ran beside the truck for several yards, his earlier certainty replaced by something rawer and more useful: attention. Danielle reached the steering wheel and turned it only a few degrees. Too much would send the truck sideways. Too little would miss the rubber barriers. The loose rear wheel scraped again, and the vehicle pulled hard toward the concrete divider. Danielle corrected, steady and precise. "Ethan, can you press your feet against the floor?" she asked. He nodded. "Good. Stay small. Keep breathing." The boy followed her voice as though it were the only solid thing in the garage. 10 yards remained. Danielle saw a thin line of fluid trailing from beneath the truck. She smelled fuel mixed with rain and hot metal. "Everyone back," she called. Nathan repeated the warning over the radio. The officers cleared the lane. Danielle reached farther into the cab and found the parking brake. It resisted. She pulled once. Nothing. She adjusted her grip and pulled again, using her weight while keeping the steering wheel aligned. The brake caught with a sharp mechanical snap. The truck slowed, but not enough. It entered the maintenance bay and struck the first rubber barrier, compressing it with a deep, hollow thump. The vehicle shifted toward the second barrier. Danielle turned the wheel and guided the front end into the padded wall at an angle. The truck shuddered, rolled another 6 feet, and stopped. For a moment, no one moved. Rain drifted through the open side of the garage. The engine ticked beneath the hood. Small pieces of safety glass settled across the passenger seat like clear grains of ice. Danielle remained half inside the cab, one arm around Ethan and the other pressed against the dashboard. "Can you breathe?" she asked. Ethan nodded, then wrapped both arms around her. Danielle closed her eyes for a single second. Her left shoulder ached from holding her weight against the moving truck, and a shallow cut along her forearm darkened the sleeve of her shirt, but she did not look at it. "Check the boy first," she said as Jason approached. Jason opened the rear door and examined Ethan carefully. Nathan called for emergency medical staff. Mercer stood several feet away, soaked by rain, staring at Danielle as though the person before him no longer fit inside the assumptions he had carried into the garage. Blake lowered his head. Reed slipped his telephone into his pocket. No one laughed now. Ethan refused to release Danielle until his mother came running from the stairwell. She gathered him into her arms, crying his name, then looked at Danielle with a gratitude too large for words. Danielle stepped back and leaned against the truck. Ryan moved toward her, reaching out to steady her. She flinched at the motion, then pointed toward Ethan. "Make sure he is safe." Her voice remained calm, but the strength beneath it had changed the room. 6 officers had surrounded her, believing control belonged to them. Now they stood silent while she gave the only order that mattered. The first ambulance crew arrived within minutes, their footsteps echoing through the garage as they moved toward Ethan and his mother. Danielle stayed beside the truck, one hand resting against the cool metal while she controlled her breathing. Jason offered her a clean cloth for the cut on her forearm. She accepted it without comment and pressed it gently against the skin. Mercer stood near his patrol car, staring at the registration screen that still displayed Walter Carter's name. The truth had been there before the truck moved. He had seen it and chosen not to admit it. That choice now felt heavier than the rainwater dripping from his uniform. A black command vehicle entered the garage and stopped near the maintenance bay. Captain Rebecca Hayes stepped out, followed by 2 internal affairs investigators and a hospital security supervisor. Hayes was in her early 50s, composed and direct, with silver beginning to show at her temples. She surveyed the truck, the officers, the emergency crews, and finally Danielle. Her expression changed. "Carter," she said. Danielle looked up. For the first time since the confrontation began, surprise crossed her face. "Captain Hayes." The 6 officers turned toward them. Hayes walked closer, studying Danielle's wrapped forearm and strained shoulder. "I have not seen you since Norfolk." Mercer glanced between them. "You know her." Hayes did not take her eyes off Danielle. "She trained my rescue unit before I transferred to City Command." Blake's face lost its color. Jason looked down at the controlled hand movement he had witnessed earlier and understood. Hayes continued, her voice quiet enough to make everyone listen. "Danielle Carter spent years teaching tactical rescue, emergency extraction, and close-range control. Half the people in this garage would not have known how to enter that truck safely. She did it while being treated like a suspect." Danielle shifted the cloth on her arm. "The boy is safe. That is what matters." "It matters," Hayes said, "but it is not all that matters." The hospital security supervisor approached with a tablet. He had already reviewed the garage cameras. "Captain, there is something you need to see." He turned the screen toward Hayes. The footage showed Danielle beside the SUV, the officers arriving, Blake taking her keys, and Mercer checking his patrol computer. The timestamp revealed that the vehicle registration had been confirmed nearly 2 minutes before Mercer ordered Blake to hold her. Hayes watched the sequence twice. No one spoke. Mercer's shoulders lowered slightly. "I was managing an uncertain situation," he said. Nathan stepped forward. His voice trembled, but he did not retreat. The situation was not uncertain after the plate came back. Mercer looked at him sharply. Nathan held his gaze. "You knew she was telling the truth." Reed removed his personal telephone from his pocket and handed it to Hayes. "I recorded part of it," he said. "I thought it was funny." Shame bent his words. It was not. Hayes accepted the telephone, then looked toward the body cameras. "Every recording is evidence now. Nobody deletes, edits, or disables anything." Mercer opened his mouth, but Danielle spoke first. "Do not explain it away." Her voice was tired, not angry. "You had the truth in front of you. You chose your pride instead." The rain softened beyond the open wall of the garage. Hayes turned to Mercer. "Sergeant, remove your badge and duty equipment. You are suspended pending investigation." Mercer looked at Danielle, perhaps expecting satisfaction. He found none. She was watching Ethan climb into the ambulance beside his mother. The person he had tried to control was not celebrating his fall. She was making sure the child could still see her. Ethan raised one hand through the open door. Danielle raised hers in return. Behind her, Mercer slowly unpinned his badge. 3 hours later, Danielle sat beside her father's hospital bed with a fresh bandage around her forearm and an ice pack resting against her left shoulder. Walter Carter was awake now. The blue wool coat folded across his knees. He had listened without interrupting while Captain Hayes explained what had happened in the garage. When she finished, Walter looked at his daughter for a long moment. "You went out for my coat," he said. Danielle managed a tired smile. "I found it." A soft knock came from the doorway. Cole Mercer stood there in civilian clothes, without his badge, his belt, or the posture that had made him seem larger in the garage. He held Walter's keys in one hand and an official evidence receipt in the other. Hayes remained near the window but said nothing. Mercer looked first at Walter, then at Danielle. "May I come in?" Danielle did not answer immediately. The room carried the quiet rhythm of the heart monitor, steady and exact. Finally, she nodded once. Mercer entered and placed the keys on the small table beside the bed. "The vehicle has been released," he said. "There was no damage." Walter watched him carefully. "That is not why you came." Mercer lowered his eyes. "No, sir." He turned toward Danielle. "I came because I was wrong." Danielle waited. Mercer took a slow breath. "I received the registration confirmation. I knew the vehicle belonged to your father. I had already made you stand against the hood, and I did not want my officers to see that I had made a mistake. So I ignored the information." His voice tightened, but he did not look away. "I chose my pride over the truth." Danielle's expression remained still. "And before the registration came back." Mercer swallowed. "I decided what you were before I asked who you were." The words settled into the room without defense or excuse. Walter's hand closed gently around the edge of his coat. Hayes stepped forward. "The investigation will continue. Officer Blake and Officer Reed have also been placed on administrative leave. Officer Cole and Officer Miller submitted full statements." Mercer nodded. "I understand." Danielle looked at the keys on the table. "An apology does not erase what happened." "I know. And being ashamed is not the same as being accountable." Mercer's shoulders dropped. "Then tell me what accountability looks like." Danielle studied him, searching for the familiar signs of performance. She found fear, regret, and something that had not been present in the garage, willingness to listen. "The footage stays complete," she said. "No edits. No private settlement that hides the reason this happened." Mercer nodded. "Agreed. Your department changes its training. Not a speech about public relations. Real instruction about bias, verification, and de-escalation." Hayes answered before Mercer could. "I will authorize it." Danielle continued. "And when new officers watch that video, you stand in front of them and explain why you ignored the truth." Mercer looked at Hayes, then back at Danielle. "Even if I lose my position." "Especially then." Silence filled the room. Walter's monitor continued its even pulse. Mercer finally nodded. "I will do it." Danielle leaned back carefully, protecting her shoulder. An apology changes a moment. Accountability changes what happens next. Mercer closed his eyes briefly, accepting the weight of the sentence. "There is one more thing," he said. "I thanked you for saving the boy in my report. I did not write that you saved me too." Danielle looked at him. "You can repay that by making sure the next person does not need my training to survive your assumptions." Mercer's face tightened with emotion, but he did not ask for forgiveness. He simply placed the evidence receipt beside the keys and stepped toward the door. Walter spoke before he left. "Sergeant." Mercer turned. Walter lifted the blue coat slightly. "A uniform can make a man visible. It cannot make him honorable." Mercer nodded slowly. "I understand that now." Walter looked toward Danielle. "Understanding is the beginning." Mercer left the room without another word. Hayes followed him into the hallway, giving father and daughter their privacy. Danielle watched the empty doorway for a moment. Then Walter reached across the bed and placed his hand over hers. He did not praise her strength or ask about her training. He only said, "You came back." Danielle looked at the rain moving down the window and felt the tension in her shoulders begin to loosen. "I told you," she said softly. "You taught me to show up." 3 months later. Rain touched the windows of the police academy in a soft, steady rhythm. Danielle walked down the main hallway beside Captain Rebecca Hayes, her left shoulder fully healed and her father's silver watch resting against her wrist. Through the glass wall of classroom 12, 40 new officers sat facing a large screen. The image frozen there showed Danielle beside Walter's black sport utility vehicle, one hand on the hood while 6 officers surrounded her. Cole Mercer stood at the front of the room in a plain navy suit. He no longer wore a command badge. The internal investigation had removed him from supervisory duty, while Blake and Reed faced separate disciplinary action. Nathan Cole and Jason Miller had remained on patrol after their full statements helped preserve the truth. Mercer pressed a button, and the footage began to play. His own voice filled the classroom, confident and dismissive. No one laughed. When the screen showed the registration confirmation appearing inside his patrol car, Mercer paused the video. Walter Carter's name glowed clearly beneath the license plate number. "This was the moment I knew she was telling the truth," Mercer said. "Everything I did after this was not confusion. It was a choice." Danielle stopped outside the doorway. Hayes glanced at her, but Danielle did not enter. Mercer continued. "I believed experience made me accurate. What it actually made me was comfortable with my assumptions. I saw her clothes. I saw her skin. I saw the vehicle. Then I built a story that protected my authority instead of protecting the truth." He turned toward the screen, where Danielle was warning them about the rolling truck. The most dangerous person in that garage was not the woman with advanced training. It was the man with power who refused to question himself. The room remained silent. Danielle felt no triumph, only the quiet weight of something finally being named honestly. Mercer looked through the glass and saw her. He did not wave or ask her to come inside. He simply lowered his head in acknowledgement. Danielle returned the gesture, then continued down the hallway. Walter waited for her in the academy courtyard, stronger now, wearing the blue wool coat she had retrieved from his sport utility vehicle. He sat beneath an awning with 2 cups of coffee and a folded newspaper between them. "Did he tell the truth?" Walter asked as she sat beside him. "He did." Walter pushed 1 cup toward her. "Then maybe he is learning." Danielle wrapped both hands around the warm paper cup. Across the courtyard, the American flag moved gently in the damp wind. "Learning does not change what happened," she said. "No," Walter replied. "But it can change what happens next." A group of recruits crossed the courtyard, speaking more quietly as they passed Danielle. One young officer paused near the door and looked back at the classroom. His expression held the uncomfortable recognition that rules could guide a person, but character determined whether those rules became protection or power. Danielle watched him return to his seat. She had once believed strength meant reacting faster, standing firmer, or carrying more than anyone else. That day in the garage had reminded her of something deeper. Strength was having every reason to become cruel and choosing clarity instead. It was protecting a child before defending pride. It was demanding accountability without losing humanity. Walter lifted his coffee toward her in a silent toast. Danielle touched her cup to his. Inside the classroom, Mercer restarted the recording. Outside, the rain began to fade, and sunlight slowly crossed the courtyard stones. No applause followed. No speech could undo the past. Yet the truth had remained visible, the people responsible had faced consequences, and the next generation was being taught to look twice before turning suspicion into judgment. The question was no longer whether Mercer had been wrong. The question was what each person watching would do when their own assumptions felt more comfortable than the truth. What would you have done in that garage?